Houston, we've got a predictable problem. Temple can't stop the nationally ranked Cougars from running out of Lincoln Financial Field with a win.
It's now 5 straight losses of 20-plus points and back-to-back losing seasons for the first time since 2012 and 2013. We break it all down and preview a road trip to Tulsa. Inside the Nest is live, and it starts right now.
Hello everyone and welcome into a brand new edition of Inside the Nest. He's Ray Dunne and I'm Jackson Neill. We're almost to the holidays and Temple's season is entering its final weeks.
But first, a ranked team made its way to Lincoln Financial Field over the weekend, and it did what ranked teams do. Houston had not traveled to Philadelphia since before anyone on this Inside the Nest staff was in college. They came to town with American Athletic Conference Championship game berth on the line. Not to mention looking for its first 9-game winning streak since 2015. A sparse crowd on a rainy and windy afternoon at the rink. Both teams started slow, but once again, Temple's opponent strikes first. Alton McCaskill takes it in from 3 yards out to make it 7-0 Houston. It was the first of a pair of touchdowns for him as he racked up 129 yards on the ground. The Cougars get another chance in Temple territory, but on 4th and 9, the Owls hold strong. Linebacker Jordan McGee steps up to force Tazwan Henry out of bounds. On the ensuing Temple possession, the Owls are driving. 2nd and 14, starting quarterback Justin Lynch rolls out and finds Randall Jones along the sideline. 3rd and 6 on Houston's 20, Lynch takes it himself and comes up short, and that does it for the first quarter. Houston's 7-0 lead after 15 minutes means Temple's now been outscored by 74 points in the opening quarter of games this season. Rory Bell missed a field goal at the end of Temple's drive, and the Owls remain scoreless. The following Houston drive stalls out in a Darian Varner 3rd down sack, one of his 2 on the afternoon. Dalton Witherspoon knocks in a 39-yard field goal on the next play to make it 10-0. That's the score at halftime. 17-0 now, and the floodgates have opened up. McCaskill's second touchdown of the game is a 34-yard draw play where he goes unbothered into the end zone. Owls trying to answer with some trickery, and Ahmad Anderson shows why he is not a quarterback, firing it right to Houston's Marcus Jones for the interception. Temple finally does get an answer with a 2-yard rushing touchdown from Edward Sadie, and a 2-point conversion makes it 24-8 in favor of the visitors. 38 in the 4th quarter now. Lynch's pass is intercepted by Gervarius Owens, and he returns it to Temple's 42-yard line. Houston punches in another score and knocks off the Owls 37-8, dropping Temple to 3-7.
Obviously, sad, disappointed. I could go on for a list of words, but at the end of the day, we got to play better. At the end of the day, it's our senior class. At the end of the day, we're still Temple tough. At the end of the day, I will always be a Temple mate regardless. So I won't come up here and say a lot of different things, but, I'm sad we're not bowl eligible, but I'm happy I can still finish this year off with these guys that I have right now.
We've always been the underdog. We've always been playing from behind. We're not a front runner team, which is one of the things I do appreciate about our team. We just play from a situation that we've been playing for a while now.
It was a similar storyline for Temple. The Owls allowed more than 200 yards on the ground to the Cougars. Most of those yards went to Alton McCaskill. The freshman back rushed for 129 yards, averaging 6 yards per carry, and had 2 touchdowns. Turnovers were also a big issue for Temple. The Owls threw 3 interceptions, including one by wide receiver Ahmad Anderson Jr. off a trick play. This all led to Houston doubling Temple's time of possession and completely controlling the clock. Another week, another dominant performance by Temple's opponent.
It's the same problems in a different game. The offense looks terrible, 3 turnovers, 4.5 yards per play, and going 2 for 10 on 3rd down, which is something we preached last week they would have to get better at converting on 3rd downs. The rushing difference in these games have also been insurmountable. Temple in its last 5 games, 472 yards on the ground compared to their opponents. 1,300 plus rushing yards on the ground. That's nearly a 900 yards worth of difference on the ground. It's not sustainable.
It really isn't, and this defense during this game looked like they played a little better if you look at the stats at first. They only gave up 10 points in the first half, and if you really look at this Houston wide receiver, Nathaniel Dell, he came into the game. He had over 800 yards in the season, 8 touchdowns. They limited him to just 2 catches on 26 yards. But if you go beyond the stats, look at the actual game. He was open several times down the field. He was running wide open down the field. Clayton Tune, the quarterback, just couldn't hit him because of the windy conditions.
Right, and I know we have ripped on a bit. I do want to bring some bright spots because there were a couple of guys defensively. They did play well in that first half, only allowing 10 points. Mahim McCargo, another 9 tackles this week. The freshman linebacker. Freshman defensive tackle Darian Varner with a pair of sacks. The defense looked competent in that first half against a very, very explosive Houston offense.
There definitely were some bright spots. But the defeat to Houston, it wasn't the only loss that Temple had this past week. Before the game, wide receiver Jaden Blue announced that he will be entering the transfer portal.
For more on the wide receiver room he leaves behind and their performance on Saturday, we welcome in Inside the Nest reporter Erik Jasper.
Thanks, Jackson and Ray. Losing Jaden Blue to the transfer portal left a void in the Owls' offense against Houston, as Blue was the leading receiver in total yards over the past 3 seasons for Temple. Saturday meant an opportunity for some Owls to show the potential they have at the wideout position. However, the result didn't go as the Owls hoped at the link. Prior to kickoff in Week 11, it had been almost 2 games since the Owls had a receiver to record a touchdown in game with over 50 receiving yards. This was a streak they were looking to break, but would have to do so without the help of their most formidable weapon at the receiver position.
Flips it to Blue, and with one hand, he gets Temple on the board.
Been highly productive here 2 years ago and last year, and it's certainly been productive at moments this year and whatever, and he just felt like this was best for him.
Get you some, Mr. Blue.
Without Blue lined up on the outside edge, struggles at the wideout position were evident. The Owls' offense only mustered up 218 total yards, with about half of that being through the air.
Happy with some encouraging signs that we fought and we were digging in and certainly trying, but just didn't execute nearly well enough on offense. They had a great week of practice, and you got a lot of young guys out there, and you just got to keep them focused on doing their job.
You got this! 6 different receivers caught just 11 total passes in 24 targets. Temple receivers couldn't get anything cooking, especially deep downfield. The Owls' longest reception went for just 25 yards.
He's single digit. He's definitely one of our guys forever. Kind of hurt, but at the end of the day, like I said, for the last guys that left, that's his choice. That's his dream. He chose to better himself, and I can never be mad at somebody to choose to better themselves for their future.
Jaden Blue's departure from Temple for a new destination through the transfer portal comes at a time in the season when any name on the depth chart can see game action, a next man up mentality that the Owls are all too used to this season.
Certainly not something unique to us as far as injuries and portals. You see it happen across all of college football. It's something that's part of the game. You accept it, and you have the next guy ready to step up.
75% of Temple's roster is made up of players with sophomore eligibility or younger. And now, another spot to fill at the wide receiver position. This leaves a pass offense with little to build upon each week. The Owls will look for a better offensive showing led by a wide receiver room that will be blueless for a second straight week as they match up with a Tulsa defense allowing opponents 232 passing yards per game. More on that matchup breakdown with Jackson and Ray later on in our show. Reporting from the Philadelphia Art Museum, I'm Erik Jasper inside the nest. Jackson and Ray, back to you in Studio 3.
Thanks, Erik. It's time for our first break of the day. When we come back, it's time to hear from the head coach himself.
We'll listen into Ron Carey's weekly press conference and break it all down. Inside the Nest returns in just 90 seconds.
Welcome back to Inside the Nest. Prior to Saturday's game against Houston, Temple already had one big loss last week. On Wednesday, the Owls' top wide receiver Jaden Blue announced his plans to enter the transfer portal.
Blue leaves North Broad as one of the most accomplished receivers in Temple history. Back in 2019, he became the first player in program history to record more than 1,000 receiving yards in a single season and is second in career receiving yardage. Blue also earned a single digit as one of the leaders of the Owls. It's a tough loss for Temple, and during his weekly press conference, head coach Rod Carey talked about the impact that Blue has had on the program.
Carey also talked about the injury status for DeJuan Mathis and graded his team's defensive performance in the loss to Houston.
Yeah, so obviously putting last week to bed, like I said after the game, certainly thought our defense played well enough to win, and our offense didn't. Special teams, obviously the fake punt, we were coming after it, had a couple missed tackles there. Certainly felt like we could have got that down, but the result wasn't good enough. So back at it now, and guys, had meetings yesterday, team meetings, and back full speed on to Tulsa. And so with that, we can open it up for questions.
Hey, Rod, just first curious if you know or expect that DeJuan will be able to practice or play this week.
I know there's improvement, that we got the injury report from today before, really off of yesterday, because haven't seen him yet today. He hasn't been in for rehab to get an evaluation done today, but I know there's improvement there. I don't know the extent of that improvement, whether he'll be able to go tomorrow in any capacity or not, but I know there is improvement.
Okay. Did your defense on film sort of after the game, you felt like, you said regardless of points, yards, whatever, we played good enough to win on defense? Did the film also show that?
Yeah, it did. Obviously, we wore out on defense from being out there a lot. So that, at the end, there were some missed tackles and some missed gaps and things like that happened from being out there a ton. But certainly can understand that, and that's why we got to pick it up on offense.
How does Jaden entering the portal affect your plans for the upcoming weeks and next season?
Upcoming weeks and next season. Well, Jaden went in last week. That was a decision that he did. So, we certainly, are moving on just like he's moving on. So that'll be a spot that we'll fill in recruiting. And, we'll look to do that any number of ways, which you do in this new era of college football recruiting, which is portal, high school, and junior college. And so we'll look to that in recruiting. As far as the upcoming weeks, we've already made those adjustments as far as who's earning playing time and who's out there.
And then I want to ask about the running game, specifically when the backs are getting the ball. You've been able to move it with Justin's legs a little bit, but, is that more on the backs themselves not making the right reads, or is that the offensive line just not creating enough movement up front?
Well, I think there's certainly combination of those two things, and then also combination of we have to be able to throw the ball better because we're getting a lot of guys down in there. So even when we are getting blocked up and hitting it right, there's an extra defender in there, and you have to take care of that with the passing game, and haven't been able to do that effectively as well. So a combination of all those things, certainly.
I noticed Saturday, Justin had 14 carries, did pretty good with them. Ed had 7, Ravon had 1. Was that more so just because of how much read option you guys called and Justin keeping it by himself? Was it by design, or just, you guys wanted to try to throw the ball and catch up on the scoreboard?
Yeah, well, I think the last thing he said was most situational football just called for that. We had, it was 10-0. We were hanging in there, and certainly weren't doing enough offensively, but was defensively, and felt like we had to get our way back into that with situations where we were throwing it. We'd like to run it more with the backs, certainly, and some of those elements, like you're saying, are read options, where he did keep some of those, but certainly situation of the game dictated that more than anything else.
Well, a lot to break down from Carey there, and that's why we turn to our Inside the Nest reporter, Erik Jasper. Erik, he heaps a lot of praise on the defense in that portion of the presser.
Of course, gentlemen, great to be with you here at the desk. And talking about the defense overall, we talk about time and time again, they're continuing to be run through. And where you got to look at how to stop and have players such as William Kwenku lead the future of this position, I'm looking at the linebackers as the effort that you talk about the defensive line and winning the battle in the trenches. But when an offensive line, that's what we saw with Houston, overpowering and allowing those gaps to open up, then you fall to the next level. And of course, that being the linebacker position. You looked at the youth and the young talent this defense has, and more particularly the linebackers, such as freshman linebacker Kobe Wilson and redshirt freshman Jordan McGee. Those players combined for 13 tackles and 2 tackles for losses. William Kwenku, a graduate student, won't be here next season. These are the names that you're going to see fill in those big shoes that William Kwenku is going to leave.
Exactly. It's all about getting those youth players, getting them some reps, getting them some experience, so that way going forward they can have a bigger impact on this program. But going forward, they also need to capitalize on these good defensive performances. You saw they were only down 10-0 in the first half. The offense needs to step up and make some plays when the game's that close.
Yeah, and I'm really curious. He gets into D'Wan Mathis' health there. Will we see D'Wan Mathis again this season? I'm not sure we will. I think you're going to get a look at Justin Lynch the rest of the way. And just to keep D'Wan Mathis healthy the rest of the way, what are you thinking?
You can't talk about it enough, the fact that both quarterbacks are so young. D'Wan Mathis being a redshirt freshman and Justin Lynch, the true freshman. You're going to continue to see their play style if D'Wan is on the field. Mentioned a couple weeks ago in the post-game presser that Justin Lynch, perhaps another 10 to 15 carries per game. So if you see D'Wan on the field, especially in the red zone, that presence with how frequent Justin Lynch runs the ball, you're going to see him just as much.
Well, certainly we will. Let's go to part 2 now, where Carey talks about his senior class with only 2 games to go. He addresses the quarterback play. And finally, Carey talks about his job security on the heels of back-to-back losing seasons.
And is there any kind of message when, bowl game is no longer sort of, there's 2 games left for these guys for this season. I don't know, is there a way that you address that message-wise versus what they've been playing for the last 8 weeks, 9 weeks?
Yeah, so really easy. We have a good group of seniors here that are fully engaged and, competing, playing some of their individual best football, like Will Kwenku wanted to keep playing. And for them, it's the last guaranteed 2 games that they have for our seniors. And I addressed the whole team with it yesterday and said, you're going to be in this seat as senior where you're coming to the end and you're going to need the rest of the team's help. And they need your help because they want to go out and leave their mark on this program and send us off in the offseason with some good momentum here. So that was the message, and everyone understood that, and we're going forward with that.
You've gone with 2 freshmen, obviously, this year at quarterback. Is that one of the things that you also look at in the future when you have that position, with young players that got some experience this year?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly think that the injury, D'Wan in and out, it has certainly hurt his development like it would anybody, right? And Justin has been prepared and preparing. But certainly, we have to improve the quarterback play and reps, game reps, practice reps, and all those things have to happen. And so, bouncing between the 2 certainly hasn't helped, but that's been out of necessity right now. And feel like, those will pay dividends down the road.
About Justin, you kind of said, he's 18 and, he has a lot of jitters, before the game that's kind of affecting his play. When do you kind of expect that, or when is a realistic expectation for that to kind of die down and for him to maybe level out? He has played a good amount of football this year.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if I knew that, then you and me should go to Atlantic City, and then we can lay down a bet we know it'll win. Everyone's different when it comes to that and how they mature and how they grow through preparation and those things, and we'll certainly work hard so that doesn't happen in the beginning of the game period for them.
Hey, Rod, for these next, these last 2 games of the season, what are you really looking to see? You and the coaching staff looking to see out of the young guys?
Same thing we're looking to see each week is improvement, and certainly felt like we had that defensively and at some positions offensively. last week, not as a unit, certainly not, but continued improvement. And that improvement is going to equal better results. And that's what we're wanting to get nonstop. And this will be a tough test going on the road against a good football team, but certainly feel like our guys will be ready to go.
In 10 years as a head coach here, have you ever felt that you've sort of had to coach for your job?
Yeah, no, that doesn't affect how we go about our deal. And we know the profession we are in. You know, we all chose it. So that doesn't enter in to anything that we do daily or thinking wise.
Mentioned a lot there, including Justin Lynch and how he's progressed so far this season.
And a lot of that falls under the umbrella of the weaponry he has around him. And he missed a lot of targets. You heard Coach mention a lot of physical errors, but also the mental miscues as well, not be able to hone in on those passes to the perimeter. He has the help. Of course, Jaden Blue's absence steps up, and Randall Jones, a graduate student, Ahmad Anderson Jr., and Jose Barbona around him. It's all about using the arsenal you have around him, and it's just allowing that development. He's only 18 years old. You can't hone in on that enough, but you got to be able to hit those targets.
And the reps, I think the reps is certainly where I come back to. He hasn't gotten that many in the first team. There's a couple weeks where he's gone in as a starter, but most of those weeks it's been, okay, when can Dewan get back? When can Dewan get back? How are we going to be able to function him in here? Without getting those reps in the first team, he's going to be off on some. I think you see with Randall Jones, you see with Jose Barbona, he's a little off with those guys. So I think it's about getting him in those reps. And like Carey said, you just don't know when mentally he's going to be at the place where he enters the game confident that he can dominate.
And it's also a tough position that he's been put in throughout this season, being the backup QB, coming in because of injury. Games like Rutgers, games like this past week where both going into the game or during the game, Dewan Mathis gets hurt, and maybe Lynch is preparing to be the backup or not sure if he's going to get the start until right before the game starts. For any QB, but especially an 18-year-old QB, that's got to be tough to prepare for and get your head ready to go out and play in a situation like that.
Well, we talked about looking on the optimistic side. There's a future here with this quarterback position. So when you look at the recruiting as well, you're going to want to bring in some help around him. And looking at, putting the perspective of this recruiting class we have coming into next season, the Temple Owls in the AAC ranks 8th with 6 3-star commits. Put in perspective, Cincy, of course, at the top, Cincinnati, 19 total commits. Got to address that and get some youth help in there.
Absolutely. It's something that we are going to address later in this show on No Huddle. Thank you so much, Eric, for joining us. That's all we've got from Rod Carey this week. It's time for our second break. When we come back, it's time for Tulsa.
We'll give you the rundown on the Golden Hurricane. Plus, No Huddle is still to come. Inside the Nest, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Inside the Nest. The Owls travel to Oklahoma this weekend to take on Tulsa in their final road game of the season.
Temple has never lost to Tulsa as a conference opponent, and the Golden Hurricane hasn't knocked off the Owls since Bruce Arians was Temple's head coach. Taking a look at Tulsa's season so far, they certainly keep it interesting. Despite being 4-6, they have only lost 2 games by double digits. They have just a +3 point differential in their last 5 games combined, winning 3 of those games. One of those games was a loss to Cincinnati, only losing by 8 points and keeping the Bearcats on their toes. Despite that, this season has still been a disappointment compared to last year's Golden Hurricane team. That group went 6-3 and appeared in the AAC championship game.
A win against Temple, though, would not only keep Tulsa bowl eligible, but also snap a losing streak. The Owls have won the past 3 matchups, including back-to-back years in 2017 and 2018. That 2017 game featured the largest margin of victory for either side in this series, as the Owls beat the Golden Hurricane by 3 touchdowns, 43-22. When the two teams met for the first time in the 80s for a home-and-home, it was Tulsa that had the upper hand. The Golden Hurricane won both matchups by a single score in consecutive years.
It's a rather general key to success for Temple this week. They need to capitalize on the opportunities they create for themselves. Temple has missed 3 field goals in their last 2 games, leaving points on the board. In this losing stretch, they've generated 6 turnovers and only scored 3 points off of them. Meanwhile, their opponents have forced 11 turnovers and scored 49 points off of them. Taking a look at red zone efficiency, Temple has been subpar, only scoring touchdowns 55% of the time they get inside the 20. All in all, Temple hasn't capitalized on its opportunities. Tulsa has also struggled in these respects. They are one of the worst teams in the red zone and in turnover margin. Temple must take advantage of the opportunities it gets.
For Tulsa, its game plan needs to be simple. Run the football early and often. The Golden Hurricane currently is second in the conference in rushing offense, averaging 190 yards per game, and it's been a team effort. Tulsa has 4 different players with over 100 yards this season, including lead back Shamari Brooks, who has nearly 800, averaging 5 yards per carry with 6 touchdowns. Meanwhile, Temple hasn't been able to stop the run at all. During its current 5-game losing streak, the Owls have given up 200 yards in 4 of the 5 matchups. But when they didn't, they allowed 199 yards to Central Florida. If Tulsa can capitalize on Temple's poor rush defense and slow starts, then the Golden Hurricane should be able to get its first double-digit win of the season.
From what to watch for to where to watch it. Once again, I'm going to need to borrow Jackson's ESPN Plus login.
Don't worry, Ray. I haven't changed the password yet. The game will be a late afternoon kickoff at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, which might be a good sign for the Owls. The last time they kicked off at that time was their 3-touchdown win over Tulsa back in 2017. Speaking of time, we're running out of ours, so we need to take another break. When we come back, we're going fast.
We'll hurry it up and go no huddle. Don't go anywhere inside the nest. We'll be back in just 90 seconds.
Welcome back to Inside the Nest. It's time for everybody's favorite segment.
That's right, and today we're welcoming on Inside the Nest reporter Emilie Cochran. I hope your debating skills are as good as your reporting skills.
You guys are about to find out.
All right, our first question, have we learned anything about the quarterback position?
Yeah, you know, I think Rod Carey has made it very clear that D'Wan Mathis is the starting quarterback, and when he's injured, Justin Lynch will take over. But in terms of where we're looking at in the future, I think both of them really need to step it up if they want to secure a spot next season as, you know, the QBs.
I'm going to disagree with you there, Emilie. Right now, I don't think we've learned a lot about this quarterback position at all. Let's go through this timeline for a quick second. Back in week 1, we heard that Justin Lynch was going to be the backup going into that Rutgers game. When D'Wan Mathis went down, guess who finished out that drive? Mariano Valenti. A couple weeks later, in a press conference, Carey mentioned how he wanted to preserve Lynch's eligibility. If you play more than 4 games in a season, you can't redshirt that. Guess what? They give Lynch 1 snap against Wagner, a snap they didn't need to give. Now, most recently in a press conference following UCF, Mathis said that he feels he can run just as well as Lynch, even though Lynch is getting more opportunities to run. As of right now, it just seems like miscommunication, and I'm not sure what's going on with this quarterback position.
Jackson, come on. You've learned plenty about this quarterback position. Maybe not who's at the top of the depth chart, but looking at the depth chart, you've learned a lot about D'Wan Mathis. You can see the injury concerns are there. You can see also the just arm talent he has and the potential that he could put this program towards. Looking at that Memphis game, what he was able to accomplish. Put that over a season, you see the potential is there. Looking at Justin Lynch, you can see the running ability. You can understand where his limitations might be right now, but as the future of a program, you can see both of these guys have a bit to their game that you can develop and turn into starting quarterbacks. Don't say you haven't learned anything. What's the point of all the football we've played so far?
I just haven't learned exactly who's going to be, starting, and that's the most important question there is. But now on for question 2. If you were in charge of recruiting, where would you start?
Yeah, you know, I think that's kind of a hard question to answer as, you know, the team is struggling in a lot of areas. But if I were in charge of recruiting, I think I would start with the O-line. You know, I think as an offense right now, they're really struggling as a whole and they need to, you know, do better in their jobs. But right now it's about protection. You know, I think the O-line is really struggling to protect the QBs. They're struggling to protect the running backs. And there's not a lot of protection going on right now. And I think that's crucial in putting points on the board. So I'm going to have to go with, you know, the O-line.
I'm going with everywhere, and I'm not saying this to be funny about the predicament they find themselves in. Legitimately, they only have 6 recruits committed to this program for next year. The number of players it takes to put on a football roster is a lot. You need to go through here and put in some work recruiting around the area. I think Emilie's answer to the offensive line is fantastic. The experience there, guys are going to graduate, and it hasn't looked too good so far. But across the board, the defensive line, some age there, might graduate out. You need to fix what you've seen so far there in the trenches on both sides. But really, everywhere across this football team, they need to take a look at, because with only 6 recruits, that's a very small class. I understand it's a young team, and the transfer portal might help that, but they need a little bit more out of this class coming out of high school.
Ray, I'm going to piggyback off your answer and tell you where they should look for those extra recruits. It's in New Jersey and Pennsylvania, their own backyard. The past 3 seasons, they finished 10th, 8th, and 9th ranked according to 247 Sports in the AAC recruiting. Back in 2014 to 2016, they finished in the top 5, including 2nd in 2016. Okay, what's the difference? Back in those years, they were averaging about 17 players between New Jersey and Pennsylvania. They were recruiting from their backyard. In the past 3 years, they're averaging just about 7. Carey and his staff need to go in around the surrounding area and get players from close to campus. That's how you build a college football program.
All right, well, moving on to, if you were the athletic director, how important is a new stadium to you?
Yeah, so that's a lot of shoes to fill if I'm putting myself in the athletic director's shoes. But to me, you know, I think being in a North Philadelphia community, our college is plopped right in the middle of North Philadelphia. People who have lived here for years. So I think it's definitely important to take into consideration, you know, the wants and the needs of the community, as well as the wants and the needs of the students as well. I understand that an athletic director's goal is to, you know, make the university happy, but I think it's hard to do that, especially when we are a city school and there's so many different, you know, considerations that need to be taken. So, you know, I would try to do the best of both worlds and try to make a compromise, but you know, Temple is still set to play at the Link until 2025, so there is some time to kind of maneuver those answers in some kind of way.
Emilie, I'm gonna have to agree with you. Excuse me there. I'm so used to disagreeing in this segment. I'm going to agree with you on this one. I'm going to say it's not that important for the athletic director Johnson right now. Look, there are so many more important things going on in college athletics, things like name, image, and likeness, getting the visibility of the program up. But right now, look at the American Athletic Conference and look at the AAC. That should be his top priority. If they're going to build a new stadium, do you think the new teams like North Texas and Rice, that's going to draw fans into the new stadium? Right now, their conference is completely in flux. That should be the #1 priority right now for the athletic director.
Both of you making great points here. The stadium is not at the top of my list. Look at this fall in terms of athletics, what they've been able to put out onto the field. All the programs under 500 this fall. Focus on winning games. Focus on making sure that stadium would actually be packed. And before you even start thinking about putting a stadium, start engaging with the community. When they did a town hall back in 2018, it was just the president talking for 45 minutes before he was interrupted by protests. Actually engage in dialogue with this community and try and make sure this is for the betterment of everyone in North Philadelphia. This should be down on the list right now. Focus on winning, focus on engaging with this community, and maybe someday it'll come around to it.
Couldn't agree more, Ray. Now to the last question. Of their last 2 games, which one is Temple more likely to win?
I'm going to go with Navy on this one, guys. Looking at this next game against Tulsa, there's one main difference between Tulsa and Temple, and that is Tulsa comes out starting fast, and Temple, we know, comes out starting so slow. I don't think that they're going to be able to acquire the momentum they need to keep up with Tulsa. I'm going with Navy on this one.
I said it before, I'll say it again. I think this Tulsa matchup is the one. Just looking at Navy's offensive game plan, the triple option. Temple has not been able to stop the run. I think that they will get triple option into oblivion against this team in 2 weeks. Tulsa beats itself. Temple also does beat themselves at times, but I think this Tulsa team gives Temple a great chance to pick up a win on the road.
All right, I know I'm supposed to pick a game, but I'm still going to say neither. I said earlier that they're not going to win a game for the rest of the season. Both of these teams, Navy and Tulsa, can run the football really well. I don't see Temple getting a win for the rest of the year.
Come on, Jackson. Always with the negativity. That's all the time we have for No Huddle. Emilie, don't go far because we're going to need you to break down the AAC.
Yes, I will be back in just a few.
It's our final break of the day, and we'll see more of Emilie when we come back. Inside the Nest returns in just 90 seconds.
Welcome back to Inside the Nest. From a memorable one in Memphis to some wild running Mustangs in Dallas, it was quite a weekend in the AAC.
For more on the outlook of the standings, we go to Inside the Nest reporter Emily Cochran, who is now over at the studio set. Hi, Emily.
Yeah, thanks, Jackson and Ray. Week 11 was a wake-up call for a lot of these AAC teams, but as usual, the standings are looking familiar at the top, but there are some changes the further down we get. The only change in the top 4 from last week to this week is that ECU and UCF switched spots. Cincinnati and Houston have been in the top 2 positions for over 5 weeks now. The Bearcats keep winning, but they look bad doing it. They are starting slow against teams that aren't really bowl-bound or at least iffy on the bowl eligibility, winning by 8 against Tulsa and 17 against South Florida. One of the weakest teams in the AAC is not going to impress those in charge of the CFP rankings. Moving down the board, Tulsa and Memphis are 2 teams that have been hard to judge. They've been floating around the middle of the AAC all season. And moving on to the Owls, Temple has officially reached the bottom 2, being 1-5 in conference play, and they're hanging out with Tulane, a team that has only 1 win this entire season. The latest college football rankings come out every Tuesday, so this list will change very soon. Right now, it has Georgia, Alabama, and Oregon, along with Michigan State in the top 4. Cincinnati moved to number 5, but it seems like no matter how its season plays out, and no matter how many games the Bearcats win, they won't be favored to crack that top 4, because they aren't looking overly impressive with their wins in the AAC. If anything, expect the Bearcats to drop a spot or 2 when the new rankings come out. That's all the college football talk I have for today. As always, Jackson and Ray, back to you guys at the desk.
Thank you, Emily. It's time for our Twitter poll where we ask you who will win this weekend. Will Temple be able to snap its 5-game losing streak and extend its winning streak in the series to 4 straight? Or will Tulsa get its first win against the Owls in over 30 years? I think I know how I'm going to vote on this one. But if you want to pitch in too, log on to Twitter and visit @OwlSportsUpdate to place your vote.
From online to on air, make sure to keep yourself locked in with the latest in the world of Temple athletics. It's a brand new edition of Owl Sports Update with Luke Milai and Lindsey Moppert on Thursday, live at noon. They'll get you ready for a busy weekend. Football against Tulsa, men's basketball playing in the Charleston Classic, and women's basketball hosting Bucknell. We're off next week for fall break, but if you follow us on Twitter, we promise you won't miss a thing. And seriously, a lot going on this week, and I know we'll be tuned in the football game. What else are you looking for in Temple athletics?
Right now, the basketball team, they're getting back into the swing of things. That game against USC, that was a really good game to watch. Tough loss, but there should be a good season coming for Aaron McKee and his program. Another Temple coach in his 3rd season.
Yes, showing a lot. And Clemson on Thursday, then potential for St. Bonaventure in Charleston. It would be nice to go to Charleston this time of year.
It would be nice to go to Charleston. Maybe we should check some flights for Thursday, see if we can get down there real quick, because like we said, we have off next week.
That is true. Well, that would be a good trip for us. I don't think I'm going to be able to join you for that one, but I hope you take it. Tulsa and Navy are the only 2 remaining on the schedule for the football team. Next time we talk to you, it will be time for the off-season.
And maybe I'll have a tan from Charleston. I can't believe this season has gone by so quickly. For Ray Dunne and the entire Inside the Nest crew, I'm Jackson Neill. See you on November 30th.